Okay, then let's start. Good morning, everybody. I'm very glad to see that so many people have shown up for the workshop Empowerment Through Education. My name is Jutta Kroll. I'm the Managing Director of the German Center for Child Protection on the Internet, and I'm going to moderate the session. Firstly, I would like to introduce you to the format that we would like to use for the session. It's called a Speaker's Corner break-in session, and I've been considering a little bit about the Speaker's Corner. Some of you might know that this is a term that named a place in the Hyde Park in London, which in my youth was very important to know that the place was there. And at my first visit to London, I went there to see how it happened. It's a small stage or a stand where people just go there, stand up, and speak out of their opinion, what they are standing for. And nowadays with the internet... Including many lunatics. Yes, that's right, but that counts also for the internet. Because nowadays with the internet, everybody has their speaker's corner at hand. You can speak to everybody everywhere. And that's also kind of a topic that we are talking about today. How are you going to be empowered to do that? How are you going to understand what could be the consequences of what you are doing there at the Speaker's Corner? So for the session, we will have 5 key persons who are going to take the Speaker's Corner, give their around 5-minute statement. The shorter you are, better brief, the better, because then after each of the key persons, we will have about 10 minutes to discuss what they've said. And I would like all of you in the room to use this opportunity to break in, to give controversy statements maybe to what has been said, so that we can have a good and interactive discussion, engaging all of you. I will try to keep strongly to the schedule so that every speaker gets their slot and that we have the 10 minutes of discussion more or less in between. And after the discussion, we will try to have a main message to take out of that, so that at the end of the whole session, we will have some messages that can be transported to the broader audience and into the plenary and into the reports. So I think I will just go through the key persons, introduce you to the key persons, and then we will start the presentations. To my left, you see Maria Jose Velasquez. She is from Bolivia, a digital sociologist, and studying at the University of Gothenburg. So, and she's also a fellow of the New Media Summer School that has taken place here in Brussels as well. And we had a little chat yesterday about the term new media, because is it really new media when we are talking about the internet as it has been there for such a long time? But still, some people see differences between the new media and the old media, and that's also about freedom of expression and about safety when it comes to the internet. Then to my right, Chatrian. I hope I did it quite well. She comes from Armenia and is there working at the Media Education Center and also running the Safer Internet Center for Armenia. To my very left, it's Belma Kuchicalic from the One World platform, and she will be going to speak about gender differences and roles in media literacy education. Then I think the youngest and the only the youngest in our among our key speakers is Auke Pals, who comes from the Netherlands, and there he is studying information science at the University of Amsterdam. And he's told me also that he's an entrepreneur and giving advice to companies on innovation. So you will explain that maybe a little bit more by yourself afterwards. And then we also have John Carr, who is... I'm not sure. The oldest male, maybe. John Carr is representing Enaxo and a very well-known expert on questions of child safety and also children's rights, working together with the British government, but with many national and transnational organizations. So, but all the other people around the table are key persons as well, and I hope to engage you in the debate. It's up to you to tell us a little bit about curricula for media literacy education.
Okay. So, hello, I am Maria Jose, Bolivian migrant living in Sweden, and the panelists and I, we agreed that we should make like an overview of what the media and information literacy curricula is offering nowadays, and to understand a bit the core characteristics of this. I have passed the last 72 hours as part of the New Media Summer School, where people from all around Europe talk and discuss about what is important for us about internet governance issues. And we encourage and we define and we concluded that it's very much needed, the digital media literacy, for us to be able to participate fully, not only in this kind of events, but also in like society. So with this little mention addressed in this presentation, I am referring to the curriculums or media literacies, because there are a plurality of this, is not only one, and how it can be included also in the formal education system. First of all, to have in mind that media and information literacy needs to function as an intercultural dialogue and also as an intergenerational dialogue, which means on the one hand that it's important to take into account that different people interpret messages differently across and within the national borders, and the exchange of practices can contribute to a better understanding and to the production of knowledge also. And on the other hand, that even though strategies and perspectives vary across generation, young people and children are also key actors in the understanding of new technologies, and are not as many times we stereotype or stigmatize them passive users of the technologies or the new technologies. I don't want to say new technologies now, passive users of the technologies. So, or they are lacking aptitude when using this. So with this, we give a new twist to the traditional, a new shift to the traditional media and information literacy curricula that is addressing such areas such as access and knowledge, critical evaluation and production of media. We include to this the intercultural dialogue and the intergenerational dialogue that is important to produce new knowledge. In second place, media and information literacy needs to be taken as a discipline in the education system, not only as a subject, but something more like a sustainable education, we can say, that is relevant to all the spheres in life. It's like to have, it's not only including a curricula of media and information literacy in the formal academic education, but it's about to acquire media and information literacy education to bring solutions to challenges in our daily life. Not only in the classroom, but transcend the classroom, not only to be fluid in technologies, but know how to decipher media messages. Let's take as an example to address the digital literacy for fighting against hate speech, which is one of the biggest challenges of youth and children navigated on internet nowadays. With the curricula including knowledge that addresses not only technical skills, as we said, but also knowledge of citizenship, freedom of expression, cybersecurity, and so on. With this curricula that includes understanding, creation, critical evaluation of media, can work as a tool for young people to recognize hate speech since the very beginning, to critically reflect on media messages, to find information, to check sources, to know how to tackle this issue. So, and to check who is producing also this information, that is important to identify hate speech, for example. And with this understanding of the rules of a website, of different systems in the internet, this media and information literacy competence addresses in a curricula can empower youth and children and provide them the ability to always be active and participative in the internet and digital arena, fluent and know how to navigate in this internet. So to understand this, we need to add, like wrapping up, I don't know how much time I have, but just for wrapping up, what is needed in the new media in the media and information literacy curricula is the intercultural and intergenerational approach to shape this curricula, and also a lifelong learning that goes beyond the classroom, that transcends the classroom.
Thank you very much, Maria. That was very good using your 5 minutes and a very good wrap-up. Anybody around the room has already a question or a statement to make to the media and information literacy curricula? Yes, please.
Yes, I would really like to understand a little more. You talk about intergenerational, intercultural, but that doesn't tell me precisely how you teach this and what you include. Is this social literacy? Can you explain a little, please?
Well, there is new approaches that are including this intercultural dialogue, which is to have information of different sources, to learn from a global landscape that we are now. It's like to have a multi-stakeholderism, but in a multicultural way. We learn from each other, we produce knowledge, and this focuses mostly in exchange best practices among countries, among places, and through this, to have more tangible results about media and information literacy, which is sometimes a very abstract concept that it doesn't, yeah.
So how do you measure it? How do you measure the level of achievement of the pupils?
What do you mean?
Are there any benchmarks?
Are there benchmarks?
Evaluation.
Yeah, the evaluation of how much digital literacy or media literacy people have achieved. Are there any instruments to measure that?
Yeah, there are, for example, the media and information literacy development indicators that measure this kind of approaches. Like, you can measure with research and so on how, to what extent is expressed the freedom of expression, to what extent it has a kind of indicators through which you can see a before and after introduction of media literacy in the curricula, formal or informal.
You please.
Yeah, I'm Nikola from ISIC Serbia, and also I'm a PhD student of adult education. And I think that it's really important to define the digital literacy, the media literacy. What is the content? Because it's the content it's developed and development influence on the content, because first we had it was enough just to know how to turn on computer and connect on internet and do search or some use Skype. But now I think that it's much more than this. If you want to use open source software, you need to know a little bit about coding, and also you need to understand the policies. The companies offer us just to tick the box. I agree with terms and conditions. They didn't offer us another one box. I accept terms and conditions without reading, and I accept the consequences. That means that we need really to understand what is inside, and for that we need much more than just basic digital literacy. And it's really the question, how develop those curriculums. And I think that as in Brazil, Paulo Freire started the pedagogy of oppressed, that we need also start some kind of emancipation, digital emancipation through non-formal education. And it needs to be blended, online and offline.
Yeah. So how we see the media and information literacy curriculum is not only about to access or to have access to technological devices, to know how to use them to navigate in the internet landscape, but also it's a mixture of skills, attitude, and knowledge that you can use in order to identify, to critically evaluate the media and so on. And about you saying that the coding is a very important thing also sometimes, there is now the debate of it should be included or not to the media literacy curricula, so it's good that you address this.
Are there developed any kind of curricula at the moment at the global level or some regional, local level?
Yeah, this is still debatable. This is still being on the table as many approaches of media and information literacy that are not.
Because in adult
Included
education we
it.
have a global curriculum for trainers of train the trainers.
Yeah.
But it will
We have another comment there.
Answering to your question directly, as far as I know, there's been countries like Estonia who have started including coding in their school curricula. And so I think, so yeah, like there's some steps going on. What I wanted to stress is, well, first of all, my name is Anna. Oh, maybe that's better. I was singing too much last night. My name is Anna, and I represent EuroDIG Europe, the European Students Forum. And besides this, I mean, I work with media on a regular basis, so needless to say, like I found media literacy as indeed like a key aspect, a key area for improvement in education of young people. But I work regularly and with the field of non-formal education, youth empowerment, active participation, and so on. And we found out that it's not only media literacy what it's needed to achieve such empowerment, but it's like really, you know, going one step beyond, like this, like a whole civic education in our agenda, an education that includes citizenship, fundamental rights, which can include indeed our rights online, media literacy, critical thinking, intercultural dialogue, and so on. And this is actually a way that we can shape active citizens and that we can, like, indeed, like, gain such empowerment. I really do not mean to be a spammer and to make some self-promotion, but actually our organization will be launching a European Citizens Initiative, probably starting from October, to include civic education in the school curricula in Europe. And also, in this sense, I wanted to stress the role of indeed youth organizations that, as has been mentioned, as indeed like providing such structures and such type of education in a smaller scale. Because, for instance, we were talking about how do we measure like this intercultural dialogue, intergenerational dialogue, and how these things improve. This is not something that, of course, it can be measured in a wider scale, but for instance, what in youth organizations do, we put a strong effort when it comes to impact measurements. So in all the training courses that we organize, in all our events and all like this kind of like lifelong learning scene, we always try to consult our members and try to check, let's say, which has been the progress in these particular skills. So that is indeed an option. And now I would also like to know maybe from other key speakers and so on, like what do you think that roles of youth NGOs and youth organizations can have in such empowerment? Thank you.
You can turn the microphone directly to the person left from you.
I think I can follow up on that and partly already answer some of the questions you put forward, which I think is very relevant. Maybe just to explain, I'm Menno Ettema. I work for the Council of Europe on the youth campaign against hate speech online. And part of the campaign has been also to promote and strengthen human rights education as a tool to address hate speech online. And so I totally agree that when we deal with hate speech, but also media literacy, it needs to be in the wider context of human rights understanding, strengthening intercultural dialogue skills, because the internet opens up the possibility to dialogue and to be in touch with the rest of the world. So we need to also have the skills to deal with cultural differences and things like that. So. And in that sense, what I wanted to add to this discussion is that the Council of Europe already has a charter on education for democratic citizenship and human rights education, which is part of the educational department and youth department of the Council of Europe. It has very clear indicators on what should be done by member states, how these issues of democratic citizenship and human rights education should be integrated in school curricula and in youth work. Now, and here the challenge is, I think, for NGOs and teacher unions and stuff like that to be active, because I think ministries are too easy to say, okay, democratic citizenship is about knowing how to vote, but it's much more. It's also about the values and the competences. And I think this aspect is through non-formal education is very strong. And we have bookmarks, which is a manual on this topic, but we have also Compass, which is a human rights manual. In addition, and this is important maybe for you to also know on your citizenship initiative, The Council of Europe is developing a competence framework for democratic citizenship, which is going to be a tool to actually measure through indicators how democratic citizenship is developed by young people or within education. So this should be a tool for teachers, youth workers alike, to actually measure what competences do we need and how do I measure this. Because there's a lot of educational programs out there, but we're wondering if it actually reaches the standards that we're looking for, which is very comprehensive knowledge, skills and attitudes. So I can talk more about that later.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being brief, because we have already consumed the 10 minutes of discussion for this point, and I'm pretty sure that all the others around the table will have the opportunity to step in at a later point. I try to phrase one main message that we can take out of this first round of discussion, and I think that the main thing that was said was the intercultural thing on the one hand, that was also debated, but then also that the media and information literacy education should be integrated into the other efforts, like education for democratic citizenship, education or knowledge on human rights. So it will be part of that education because it's interrelated. We cannot see media information literacy as something completely different that is part of a different type of education, because just when it comes, for example, to hate speech, we are not talking about a thing that happens only online. It has become more focused online, but because it's more widespread. But in the end, we are talking about relationship between each other and about human rights and about democratic citizenship. So if there is no counter speech about against that, I would think that one main message is that it should be integrated. So Nareen, it's up to you. Nareen will be talking about possible barriers, difficulties and limits associated with the role of parents in media education literacy, media literacy education, sorry.
Thank you very much, Jutta. I'm speaking on behalf of a non-governmental organization. We have launched this year the 8th edition of Safer Internet Armenia program with support and participation of different stakeholder groups, public bodies, industry, civil society. We have been organizing training and awareness-raising activities for children, parents, teachers, social workers, engaging nearly 70% of Armenian secondary schools. And we have great international partnerships. We have had, I would like to mention that we have had a very good partnership with the InSafe network and now with the Better Internet for Kids and INAXO network. And we have never stopped looking for new ways of educating and empowering children and adults taking this opportunity. I'd like to ask everyone and invite everyone to think, what do you think, how best to support parents and teachers in helping children to develop, on one hand, healthy habits of ICT use, and on the other hand, the critical reflection of media. Since technologies are evolving quickly and children become increasingly immersed into digital environments since younger ages, apparently our purpose should be twofold: to teach proper skills to take advantage of new technologies, and simultaneously to teach how to handle the influence of the ICTs. And as our practical experience has demonstrated, there is a big gap between children's technical level of expertise and their social skills. When we say children are more knowledgeable in ICT matters than their parents, actually we speak about their technical expertise. Young people may acquire very good technical skills to work with ICTs, but usually their social development, their social skills, their emotional development lag behind. And this we consider the biggest problem, and particularly in our country. On the other hand, children's development, emotions, and attitudes are greatly shaped by what they watch and hear on the internet, in media, and while we try to define the limits of empowerment strategies, shouldn't we ask the following questions to ourselves, to researchers? How the exposure to adult materials affect young people's behavior, their perceptions and attitudes, their social and emotional development? What do you think? Violence, hate speech, gender stereotypes, exploitation, sexualization in media and online. Are we able today to assess the short-term and long-term impacts of those environments where our children spend enormous hours? When we try to define the limits of empowerment strategies, perhaps children's age is number one to mention. What do you agree? And the second topic which I would like to slightly touch upon is the adoption of technology in the classroom. Technologies are great tools for education, but on the other hand, recent global studies demonstrated that heavy investments in school computers and classroom technology have not improved pupils' performance in no single country. Shouldn't we revise our approach to using ICTs in education? What do you think? What should be the focus of such initiatives? As one laptop per child or one tablet per child? Should we more concentrate on tools or competencies? And what competencies, I'm concluding, and what competencies should we prioritize, since we have started discussing media literacy, so which competencies should we prioritize? Technical skills like coding, critical thinking skills, or social skills, communication, participation, or a content creation capacity? Let's start discussion and try to find answers to these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nareen. I think you have put so many questions to the audience that it's easy for you to step in and to try to give answers. Yes, please.
Maciej Tomaszewski from the European Commission. Actually, I would not give you any answer.
Where's our co-moderator?
Thank you. I intervene right now because I have to leave in a moment. I will explain you why. But
Don't leave before gender.
I know, I would love to, but unfortunately I have to leave because I need to discuss the preparation of the annual colloquium on fundamental rights.
Sir?
You understand? And why I'm mentioning that is that this year's colloquium is focused on media pluralism and democracy, and there are several questions related to media literacy. So all the things that you're actually discussing would be absolutely great if we could get the outcome of this discussion, your data, because that's what's important for us, to get data, examples of things that do not work, and some ideas how we can fix them. And the Commission has already organized last year this colloquium on tolerance, on anti-Muslim speech, on anti-Semitism. I think we delivered quite many concrete results, like we have Code of Conduct on Illegal Hate Speech Online, that you may be well aware of. And I think that this year there is appetite also to do concrete things. So if you could participate, help us in this debate, that would be absolutely fantastic. So many thanks.
Thank you.
There is someone over there. Can we have another microphone in the room so that we don't lose so many time with switching the microphone from right to left?
Yes, thank you. My name is Rabea Hullers. I'm working at the Council of Europe. And I wanted to continue a little bit the discussion about education for democratic citizenship, because I find this very crucial. And when we think of education for democratic citizenship, we also have to think about, for what kind of democracy we want to prepare the students, because well, the model of representative democracy, there are so many problems associated with it at the moment. So I think education for democratic citizenship should also teach like innovative ways of democratic decision making, which are more participatory. So really in this context of participatory and deliberative democracy. And of course critical thinking is crucial for this as well. I think we should really be focusing on the more participatory aspects there, and prepare the students also for a world in which democratic participation is actually not only about voting your representative, but really changing this political culture towards more participation on a daily basis. And actually at the Council of Europe we are preparing a forum actually exactly about this question, which will take place in November. It's called the World Forum for Democracy. And the focus of this year's World Forum for Democracy is exactly about education and empowerment through education. So I would also really invite you to join us also for this debate at the Council of Europe in November, because of course we really rely very much on your expertise there as well.
Thank you. Could you say where it takes place?
In Strasbourg. It's
Strasbourg.
taking place from 7 to 9 November in Strasbourg
Okay,
this year.
thank you. So then we have you over there, and then the guy standing in the back.
I'm Paolo Celot from IAVI. Just in logical disorder, some specific things that come into my mind, listening to what you mentioned. Indeed, is a very broad subject, so maybe we will discuss it a bit later. But I think it will be very, very easy to get lost, and this is what has happened in the last years. Media literacy and media information literacy is about too many things. But I think it would be helpful to build on what has been done so far. And there are a number of resources that are accessible. Indeed, you are aware of the work that the UNESCO has done about teacher curricula. We ourselves, on behalf of the European Commission, have done a number of studies on media literacy and on media literacy assessment. Indeed, they do exist indicators, but there is a very controversial issue. There is this frame and this conceptual map that exists, and indeed the core aspect of media literacy is critical capacity. So indeed coding is important, but decoding is, for the sake of this argument, is even more. And the three aspects are indeed the technical issues, broadly defined, but then indeed we have to be updated with what is going on. So what does this encompass? Critical is meaning analysis, meaning the capacity to evaluate media messages. And I'm sorry, I have hearing aid, so the tone of my voice I have to calibrate. And but the participatory aspect and communication is indeed very important. About the competencies and things that can be done about children, I think that one thing would be to raise awareness. We have developed, produced, and distribute in 20 different languages short cartoons. One of them is about awareness, meaning that if a child take distance and reflects on the fact that he's playing, has been played or has been on internet, for instance, for a couple of hours, this already is a good step to reflect about his behavior. One more thing that I just want to touch upon is that empower doesn't mean protection. Empower is a more promotional, proactive things, much broader and concept. I stop here
Thank
for
you.
the moment.
Yes, please.
Charles, I'm from Yandex. A couple of things. I strongly agree with Paolo. Critical thinking is the absolute underpinning. It's pretty much pointless to try and teach coding to people who don't have a capacity for critical thinking, because they'll be rubbish coders. Whereas when you teach critical thinking, you need something to teach it through, right? You can't just say, we're going to learn to think critically. You have to think critically with something concrete. Coding is as good a thing as language or building cars or cooking. They're all subject material. Putting technology into schools is valuable, not because it's anything very magical, but because it provides a way of making sure that all kids get to see and play with the kind of stuff that is part of the world. And that's what it really does. It doesn't actually teach them anything brilliant. They will learn how to use machines as much as they care. And again with coding, most people in real life don't care. They don't want to learn coding because they're never, ever going to do it. Like the people who buy video recorders and never, ever used it, programmed it to record the TV. It's just not relevant. So focusing too hard on teaching stuff that people don't want is a waste of resources and a waste of people's time. You're not giving children the things they need.
Thank you very much for and bringing in that from the old media, that example about video recorders. We have one person there, and then we have one remote participant, and then we go to the next key person.
Right, I will try
Yes,
to keep this short and snappy. My name is Carolina Andersdotter. I come from IFLA, International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. And I noticed we have been discussing in a quite abstract way how and when and why we should have media and information literacy. And I would like to propose a solution. Both participatory and technical aspects of media literacy should be taught by libraries, obviously. And the reason I'm saying this is that it's already taught by libraries. The importance of media and information literacy as an educational discipline has been discussed here, and this means that it's not something inherent in every teacher, but rather a specific topic, one which librarians happens to be experts in. Therefore, school libraries have a vital function in teaching literacy skills, and these skills will then be applicable to every subject they would study in school. So it's a sort of umbrella topic, and that's also how you would evaluate your skills, the question you had before, because you would see it seep through everything you teach, which is a great thing. And so library staff support the use of books and other sources, both fictional and documentary, both print and electronic, and on-site and remote. And they would teach, well, they would provide materials and different methodologies for students to learn from. And it has been demonstrated that when librarians and teachers work together, students achieve higher levels of literacy, reading, learning, problem solving, and information and communication technology skills. So it has always been there, but it has become more important due to the vast information resources available today. And this is a good thing because it opens for more and different perspectives. But it also means there is less curation of the available content in the library, and therefore, because anyone can publish themselves, and therefore skills for critical evaluation is much more important today than it was perhaps before. And this is what school libraries and public libraries teach. So recommended reading about this would also be the UNESCO and IFLA School Library Manifesto. But I do think libraries have a vital role to play here, and they already are. So any initiatives should be like in collaboration, because there are a lot of skills to use there which are not being used currently.
Thank you very much. So we take the remote comment.
Actually, so first of all, my name is Michael Ogia. I'm a New Media Summer School Fellow as well, and I am the remote moderator, but it's actually something I want to say, and not there's no remote comments right there. So I'll just keep this short. I want to piggyback on, kind of follow up rather on what was something that was said before. I arrived in Brussels on Saturday, and on Sunday I had lunch with two friends. One of which she happens to be in her 40s, and she has a 7-year-old son. And she was telling me about her son goes to a school here in Brussels, a good school. And yet, according to her, there's not one single computer that is eligible for the elementary school kids to use here in Brussels. And so I just think it's interesting that, especially here we are talking about this obviously with global implications, is sitting in the capital of Europe, and yet there are schools that still do not have not just the ability for, or not just skills being taught, but the ability for those skills to be taught that goes way beyond the capacities to teach them. You can't teach coding, forgive me if I'm wrong, without someone access to some kind of a computer. So I just wanted to share that anecdote to help frame the conversation and keep it also grounded with the idea that there's still a lot of challenges to that everyone in all countries and schools have to overcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Again, I try to phrase a key message from that part. I think that we will stick to our timetable, and you will have 3 more slots where you can step in. I try to phrase a message from that part, and I think many of the questions you have posed have been answered, like the one about technology in schools. We cannot answer that completely, but at least we got a notion that they are important, even though you have some statistical evidence that the learning achievements did not improve in all the subjects, but the computers play an important role when given access to the children at schools. I think one of the main messages is that empowerment does not mean protection only. Protection can be part, must be part, but we could not see that empowerment would be protection. Empowerment through education should go far beyond, and it should empower for critical thinking, and I think also what you mentioned, the critical evaluation of the content that you will find. Like you've put, that's already always been a task of librarians to teach people to critically evaluate the content they find in the media that are provided. So I think that was a short phrasing for the main message. Now we come to gender aspects from media literacy education.
Yes, I can talk a lot, so please just feel free to be 5 minutes. Can you then just imagine computers in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Hello to everybody, my name is Belma. I come from Sarajevo, capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, from an organization called One World Platform, and I actually had many different intros, but now Charles and you, sir, you gave me a completely other way of starting my conversation with you today. What I want to point out, please, gender is not a female issue or women's issue. Gender is an issue of our society. Also, I want to, before I actually start on what we do and why is it important today, majority of what you said about coding, there's a lot of initiatives on girls and women and ICT called Girls Should Code or Girls Code or whatever. Personally, and I've been dealing with girls and women from Bosnia and Herzegovina for past 4 years now, I don't think that every girl should know how to code. I think that she should or he should have an opportunity to learn. That's the entire point. Not everyone should or can code. Now, One World Platform in Bosnia and Herzegovina is we're actually the only organization in Bosnia and Herzegovina that deals with empowerment of women through technology. And on the other side, we talk about what Mr. said, empowerment does not mean protection, which is my favorite sentence so far. We also deal with online harassment and cyberbullying of girls and women online. Now, there are 3 major things that I want to point out today. Role models, unemployment, and accessibility. And please have in mind that I come from a country that is not part of the European Union. However, geographically, we are part of Europe. Now, in terms of role models, I think it's actually global issue. It's not the issue of Europe or Bosnia and Herzegovina. If we think what are the models that we give to girls, for example, I'll tell you a quick story. When I got here, I had to change to different airports. And I found books, I think here, there's like a little cartoon book for kids. There's a boy on the cover, and the book is called Boys Learning How to Create Video Games. And there's a boy on it. No, it's just a video, create your video game. And there's a picture of a boy. And then on the other side, it's the same publisher. There's a book called Online Security, and there's a girl on the front of the page. So immediately, and of course it has pink covers still in 2016. So it's immediately girls are connected with safety. Girls are connected with tech and human issues. For example, in parallel right now, my boss, and I'm lucky to have her as my boss, is sitting. She's the only woman in the panel on surveillance and terrorism. You're not going to see a lot of girls and women discussing cyber terrorism. When we talk about human rights and lighter issues, then we have female. Why am I talking about this issue? This is the first problem. Do we give role models to girls to start with from in educational system? We've been working a month ago with girls from 13 to 15, and we've been talking about Grace Hopper, Hedy Lamarr, and Ada Lovelace. And nobody knows that one of the first programmers in the world was female. That we have Wi-Fi today because there was a lady, there was a girl years and years ago who actually tried to, who also had opportunity at that time to actually do this. So, okay, unemployment. Why is unemployment super important? There's Bosnia and Herzegovina has 60% of youth unemployment, and for us, we have enough lawyers and economists. We're done with that, but we need to open our. We need to bring more girls to job markets where they work in ICT environments. Why? For example, Bosnia and Herzegovina doesn't have problem as Americans, for example, where we lack girls in STEM in schools. We have almost 50-50 range if we talk about educational systems and girls enrolling in engineering and etc. However, then you have educated girls and then you have patriarchal system and society that tells them that they should have kids, and maybe it's better for them to have kids rather than actually be a CEO of a tech company. So you don't really see them afterwards. You're not going to see them as a CEO of a tech company, or you're not going to see them, I swear, one more minute, and you're not going to see them in decision-making processes if we talk about ICT. As well, you're not going to see female hackathons or girls being part of hackathons or tech startups. And 3, accessibility also has to do with culture and societal differences, where, for example, according to our fieldwork, you have especially talking about rural areas, because Sarajevo is not Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm super privileged to actually be here today and speak with you in a language that's not my native language. So a lot of girls and women from Bosnia and Herzegovina, if they have a brother who's younger than they are, the brother will get cell phone first, and then she's gonna get her cell phone or computer or whatever. So we have that type of accessibility, and then much less if we talk about any other type of accessibility. And I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very fast and very impressive. And yes, would you like to step in?
I would like to, but not in this gender topic.
Yes, but then I need to ask you to wait a little bit, because we are talking about other issues as well, but now the discussion should be about the gender issue. Nobody who...
Or somebody wants to share their own context and girls in tech and what are the solutions and how do we discuss different contexts and different societies and different mechanisms. There you go.
Maybe the lady in the second row first, because Janice, you've already been talking.
Hey, you said lady. There's this trans thing. I am
queers. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I am actually a trans guy. But there is also the issue with non-binary people. We tend to talk a lot about just women and men, but there is also people that aren't identifying as either. My partner is one of them. They are intergender. So we need representation from all different people. And I myself am a programmer, but I actually receive kind of like disappointment from some movement that, oh, such a shame that you're not a woman, that you can't represent women. But then I try to encourage them with like, but I'm a trans person. That's kind of great to to have those in programming as well. So we have to have this queer perspective of this as well.
And could you say how does that relate to the media literacy education? Do you think that we would need special addressing in the literacy education curricula?
More like we have to empower more trans people to be included in media. For example, gaming industry. There is not at all a lot of games that have characters that you can identify with if you are queer, for example. And a lot of examples in education where they only use binary genders and stuff like that. So we have to see to it that non-binary people and all different kinds of queer people can identify with everything within the media and yeah.
Fully agree, and I congratulate you. And I think one of the first steps is that you yourself is such a important role model. But the reason why I didn't put it first, I swear, all over my we work with LGBT community in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But then again, if you go back to my context, all of my friends who are queer have violence on daily basis. I don't know. Just Google it up, so it's even a bigger issue. So for them, it's important to have Wi-Fi currently. And then next step is thinking about identities and internet and whatnot. So each context has their priorities. And I agree that gender is not about female and male. We should think about entire spectrum. And thank you for the comment.
Janice?
Thank you, Janice Richardson, European Schoolnet. There has been a lot of research done on this, and it shows that girls, for example, are better at the science subjects than boys, better at math subjects than boys early on. But it's girls who don't have the same expectations of themselves. And this is where it needs to change. And this is why it is so important, social and emotional learning at school from a very, very early age, where girls don't have to be very embarrassed if they're a leader in their field. They don't have to worry about not looking feminine because they don't play with dolls. And so there is a lot of research. I won't go into it, but it is girls' view of themselves as girls that are creating a lot of problems. Where do you start? Well, you start from age 0. You start with informing parents. And I think it's exactly the same as what you said. This is where you also have to start in the LGBT debates.
But then again, it's the environment that is a social construct, and an environment is not created by girls only. I agree with you, but girls expect that because society expects that.
I'm part of a women's tech hub in my city, and it only started up about a month ago. I'm from Bristol in the UK. My name's Ruth. Sorry, I always forget to introduce myself. It's been really amazing because I was really into technology when I was a teenager. I went to a summer camp where I was one of 4 girls and 50 boys. And when you said, "Oh, I want to learn programming," people would kind of just do it for you. And the only girl in the IT class and stuff. And I think it's getting a lot better in schools. But what the Women's Tech Hub in Bristol has been identifying really is that a lot of people go into it and then leave, and it's not because they don't believe in themselves, it's because the environments themselves aren't welcoming, and the stuff that they are teaching us is very different. It's not tech skills, and it's not education in a school or to teach us, it's sharing, it's peer education and peer sharing, and it's education without the kind of someone is the expert telling you what to do kind of patronising-ness, which, to be honest, is like generally how women are addressed. You need to learn how to code. You need to learn how to do it this way. You need to apply for... So one of the things that they've been looking at is the recruitment processes and the way that a lot of jobs have essential requirements and desirable requirements. And then people keep going, "Oh, women need to be educated to apply for higher level jobs." And I'm like, no, actually the companies need to be educated to advertise how they actually want, what they actually want. And they need to advertise in ways that doesn't only focus on things that reach the same people. So maybe part for me of education for empowerment is those people who are being excluded, women and other minorities, to actually educate tech companies and to educate that way round. And that's the way that we can have an empowering education.
Okay, thank you. I take one more comment and then we wrap up this.
I'll try to be, I'm starting a micro comment. I'll try to be short to the point and a very practical point of view. I totally agree with the speaker, and I think all these elements need to be addressed. If I look at our campaign, for example, when we did a campaign day on sexist hate speech, this is a great opportunity to actually address this kind of concerns. But many of our youth workers say, okay, I address sexist hate speech, but then what I'm actually discussing afterwards is human rights in general, situation of women in society, LGBT in society. So for me, entry points could be sexist hate speech, and then to act, but we need to empower the teachers, the youth workers to then broaden that discussion on more systematic discrimination issues in society at large. So I think when approaching a gender issue, we need to really empower people and to give them the right tools, and there are enough manuals out there. Give an entry point, sexist hate speech could be one, but then do the whole package. Connected to that, I wanted, what I mentioned yesterday also in the plenary, this whole code of conduct of the EU doesn't mention gender and does not mention LGBT. And the EU was quite honest in this, yes, because our member states are not willing to go that far of discrimination based on gender or based on LGBT, sexual orientation. Member states are not willing to go there yet. So, and this is a real problem, and that we really need to, because we don't have the legal means in all countries to actually deal with this. So, and that comes to the last point. I think internet governance really needs people to speak up, and all these platforms that we're visiting doesn't have proper representation. I think so we need to lobby, also see here how we can improve that, because that's very important.
Thank you very much. I think it's easy to wrap up that, because the first sentence Balma you said was gender is not a female issue, but an issue of society. And if we summarize everything that has been said, it's everybody's part of this society, and it doesn't matter which gender you're representing. It's a question of society, and then it's a question of human rights as well. So I think we can summarize that in short. Now, Auke, it's your turn to talk about age barriers for children. We have not yet been talking about age, although we have had a lot of considerations that are related to age, and not everything that was said counts for children and youth of all age. So it's up to you to go to that point.
Thank you. Yesterday and today there has already been some technical sessions about blocking, censorship, deleting content. And that's kind of making the issue urge. But I first want to take a look at the start of the internet, and with the start of internet governance, with the declaration of cyberspace by John Perry Barlow. And he addressed that the aim of the internet was not to be ruled by anyone, but by collaboration between different stakeholders, what we call the multi-stakeholder model. And today, in this session, I want to talk about the GDPR and overall equality. I think the recently adopted GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is already a way in a good direction. For instance, for data portability, the privacy by design, and the obligation for companies to report data breaches. But unfortunately, the policymakers that has been working on the GDPR have made it difficult to draw a clear line between, in the whole of Europe, to decide what age is going to be allowed using social media, and on which age data collection has to be stopped or has to be allowed. These children are banned from social media, like for instance Google, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and WhatsApp, and so on. But also legally, they're also banned from all services that collect data from them, Also, for instance, online games or other services. Both technical and socially, it won't be able for these children, or it won't be able to ban all these children from these services. These children are being raised with the current technical influences around them, in which, yeah, they can be it can be good in many cases, these technical advantages. For instance, at school we're already learning with iPads, for instance, or tablets, and they can, with these technical solutions, they can be empowered on their level of education. So, for instance, someone that's less developed can learn on their level in the same class with their classmates with the same age. The current children are walking around with phones already at an early age, and I don't think we have to stop them from using that. And these children are having these devices and they don't want to stop it, so they will figure a way around that. And the actual regulation that's not allowed to have data collection from age of 13 it's a big clash with the current society, because the actual regulation is made by politicians, and the GDPR has been proposed in 2012, and now in 2016 it's actually accepted, and in 2018 it will be coming to force. And as an entrepreneur and consultant, I don't like to point out only the problems. I would just start making social media available for everyone. Also for the children underneath the age of 13. Because these children are affected by all these influences in social life, and they will find a way around it. So there will be no good way of regulating that. I think we have to start with educating these children on the effects of what they're posting online, or what it will mean for them if they're doing something online or having some actions to be published. I will wrap up. And that will, my last statement will be, it would be a shame to block the people that are technically able to use the internet and using social media by some stupid regulation and decided by old politicians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Orca. I just propose to change the agenda a little bit, because I know that John Carr is also able to talk about the age restrictions and age barriers. So we take your statement now, and then can you hand over the microphone, please? Okay. Okay. And then we will discuss what can education do to empower young people at what age to make use, not to overcome age barriers, but to deal with them. So John Carr, it's your turn.
So point number one, I guess. There was a major piece of research done in the United Kingdom, which is where I'm from. Sorry, John Carr, representing the European NGO Alliance for Child Safety Online. So there was a major piece of research done in the United Kingdom a few years ago, led by Professor Andy Phippen, and he interviewed teachers in schools where the children were just arriving, big school, okay? So children had been in infant schools and junior schools, and in the UK, around the age of 11, 10, 11, you go to big school, okay? That we call them secondary schools. What all of these teachers said, pretty much, or a vast majority of them said, was that by the time the children are arriving at big school, so aged 11, 10, 11, maybe 12 at the outside edge, their habits as internet users have already been formed, okay? They arrive at school and they do things using the computers, using the internet, using their different devices, and if teachers can do anything, it is remedial in nature. So when we discuss education and empowerment, what we really need to be thinking about is how we reach these young generations of users. 30% of children of the age of 3 in Great Britain have got their own tablet, okay? They're not borrowing their parents. They're not borrowing their big sister or their big brother. They have their own. So these are the age groups that we need to be focusing on if we are talking about education and empowerment. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about remedial work, catching up, correcting things later on. And by the way, I mean, no disrespect to EuroDIG, but my definition of a young person is obviously very different from the definition that EuroDIG works to. There isn't a country, in every country in the world that I know of, when you reach the 18, you are an adult. Your legal position, your legal rights, everything is identical for a 95-year-old and an 18-year-old. Children are people below the age of 18, and you never see them in EuroDIG. They're not in this room. They don't have beards. They don't go to ABBA discos. But this is a critical group of users. Now, let me just go back very, very quickly, I guess, to this point about the GDPR. This is the single most important decision that the European Union has ever made about children's rights in the online space, and they got it comprehensively wrong. Okay? Let me just read briefly from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, Article 12. States parties, that's governments, shall ensure every child who is capable of forming his or her own views, the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting them. Article 13, every child shall have the right of free expression, have the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds in any form or through any media of the child's choice. Notice, neither of those articles mention an age limit. They talk about the capacity of the child, but they don't speak about an age limit. Neither do those articles speak about the child needing the parents' permission to do these things. No, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child says this is a right, a legal right that the child has in and of their own right. What has the European Union done? It has said no. You have to be 16 before you can join Facebook, before you can download an app, before you can have an email account, before you can do many, many things that today we take for granted that we all do on the internet. And you have to be 16, otherwise before that age, so 15, 14, 13, whatever, you need your parents' permission. Why? Because they didn't think it through, they didn't get it right, they didn't speak to anybody. This was a very bad, a very rushed decision. So whereas previously we had a de facto practice of 13 as being the minimum age, one that was widely ignored, but we'll come back to that no doubt in discussion. Nevertheless, we had a de facto minimum age of 13 for every country in Europe except Spain, based entirely on a piece of legislation passed in the United States of America in 1998, before Facebook, or indeed before Web 2.0 or social media existed. We've now got not just 4 potential new ages, because although they said 16 is the default minimum age, the new default minimum age, member states will in fact be able to choose 15, 14, or 13. So whereas in the past, every child in Europe had the same sort of possibilities to go online and communicate, bearing in mind the rule of 13, now member states are going to be able to choose 15, 14, or 13, or in fact, they could choose 15 and a half, 14 and a half, 13 and a half. It's a really appalling decision. And yet, there are many people in the parliament, many people who were here, who were not aware that this had happened. It shows you, by the way, the bubble that some of us live in. I mean, obviously, for me, this has been a huge deal. I can't imagine how they made such a terrible mistake. I spoke to a member of Parliament, the member of the European Parliament today, had no idea about what I was talking about, and yet they voted for it. So there we are. There are lots of practical consequences that arise from this. Let's assume, my last quick point, I'll give you one concrete example. Let's assume your country decides to stay with the default age of 16, okay? There's the minimum age at which you can join Facebook or a social media platform. Say I'm a paedophile and I go to Facebook looking for somebody to connect with for the purposes of having sex. I'm entitled to assume, legally, that everybody I now meet on that platform is at least 16 years old, because the law says you've got to be 16 to be on there. Can I be arrested for grooming that child or that young person, even though they're not 16 or whatever? Probably not. If the age of consent to sex is the same, which it is in Britain, for example, 16 is the age of consent to sex. If 16 is the age of is the age at which you can join the social media platform, everybody who goes to that platform will be entitled to assume that the person that they're now talking to on that site is 16 and therefore is open to being sexually propositioned without it being illegal. It's another example of how people here in Brussels didn't think it through. They didn't talk to people who knew about these issues. They just rushed it through at the last minute, and it's a complete disgrace. I think it contravenes the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I think it would be open to legal challenge. Remember, the single most important decision, this is literally my last word because I can see Jutta getting agitated. Young Mr. Schrems in Austria, he brought down the entire transatlantic data transaction laws which the European Union and the United States of America had put together. He took them to court and won and completely turned upside down the whole basis in which transatlantic data transactions had taken place. I am convinced that there is a child out there now, a young person out there now, is going to take their national government, possibly even the European Union, to court in the not too distant future and get this overturned because it contravenes international law. There you are. I've said too much.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. And I think now we have 40 to 50 more people in the room who know about this, and maybe one of them will have a child that will take them to court one day. Yes, I have seen some hands already raised, and so does it fit in right now? Then you'll get the microphone now.
Actually, it fits into the gender issue tangentially, nevertheless. My name is Osman, first name. Last name is very difficult, so let me just stay there. And I'm a professor of ICT, Information and Communication Technologies. I don't have educational, I do teach, of course, but I did have a student, yes, I did advise a thesis on effect of getting exposed to or having access to technology, digital technologies, let's say, on the students. I'm aware of Professor Pippin's study, incidentally the gentleman mentioned, I apologize, I don't know his name, but I will make 2 points. And the reason I'm making these points, let me mention that earlier too. I was a member of Turkish Parliament, and as such I was member of Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe as well. And over there I raised these issues, and I hope some action will be taken by the Council of Europe along these lines, not only EU. But there is a digital divide that everybody knows, our research findings. I will make just 2 points of that. There is a digital divide that we all know. But there is also a secondary digital divide that we found out, I thought we found out in this research, but I realized that it was earlier detected, in fact, under the name of Matthew's effect, referring to Matthew's chapter of the Bible. It is those who have will have even more. What does this equate to? Giving children the technology does not necessarily eliminate, let alone reduce, does not even reduce, let alone eliminate the digital divide, but it can even exaggerate that. That's because there is something called social capital that you come to the school with, 10, 11, 12 years old, Professor Pippin's study shows, establish your internet usage abilities and habits. But those who do not have that background, like in Turkey, then they stay away with the concern that they will touch into the technology and break it down. And that applies to gender too. The girls, well, in this case, girls are more afraid of getting close to the technology.
May I ask you to be a little bit brief?
This is a real general concern. There's a major so-called project, it's not really a project, Fatih in Turkey, giving tablets to every student and having interactive whiteboard, well, they call it smart whiteboard. There's nothing smart about it, but it's interactive. Whiteboard to every classroom. A major so-called project is not even a project to begin with. Second, it does not reduce the digital divide, and hence the last recommendation that I will make is that Council of Europe as well as EU should prepare guidelines on, well, critical thinking and of course very important, but guidelines on having access to digital technologies and educating the parents if we want a good result along those lines. And I, as a former politician, also agree that politicians do not realize youth's needs and attitude towards technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have picked up a good point, because when talking about guidelines, and on the other hand, what we've just heard from the two last key persons in the session is that when it comes to that age barriers, what would be with the guidelines? Would we have a different guideline for children to be educated in a country that has picked up 13 years of age barrier, or 14 or 15 years? So what guidelines would we produce and what curricula would we produce? And we already had come to the conclusion that intercultural curricula would be good to have, but on the other hand, if we don't have an intercultural agreement about what is the right age for children to access social media, then it's a complete mess. We would not end up with guidelines that could be of use for everybody. So we have you in the background, and then you over there, and Hans.
So a couple of points. Lots and lots of 20-year-olds are not allowed to buy beer because they live in the United States, and yet the world doesn't fall apart. Right? We can actually deal quite well with different age limits as part of intercultural understanding. We know that different cultures set different rules. Lots of children do go to discos. They're not allowed to, and it's illegal, but they go anyway. Lots of children learn to drive cars and use guns and do things that legally we say this is not something people should do, but we know they do it, and as Osman says, we know they get social capital by being able to do these things. So one of the critical things is not, how do we get to the children? It's like, how do we teach children who are 3 and 5 and 7? And part of that comes through curricula and schooling, and part of that is something that schools will not be able to do. You have to work with parents, families, peers, and make sure that they are part of children learning to understand how technology works because by the time they get to the school is not equipped to really change what they do. If we're not getting into the understanding of how society sees these things, we're fooling ourselves, and we will have a very limited impact.
Over there, and then we have Hans on the right side.
I just want to make a comment about what you mentioned and policy. Is so true that the fact that notwithstanding evidence is the European Union came up with such a nonsense. Is saying that is the limit age. Given also the fact that member states can decide below 16 years old. Why is that? I think that is we should reflect. There is no. It should not be very surprising. At the same time, while we are discussing about the importance of media literacy has disappeared in the proposal of the Audiovisual Media Service Directive that the European Commission has just sent to the European Parliament. So we have to be aware that in Brussels, unless the interest of, let's call it the educational sector, civil society, that is judged quite naive or an Indian reserve, because there are on the other side much stronger economic power that put forward their interest in a much better organized way, has now set the scenario by which we are talking about consumers and markets and non-citizens, and is all a matter of business, technology, and not critical thinking. Is a commercial interest rather than social and cultural ones. This is not a surprise. I would say that if we want to achieve some more tangible objectives, we have to strengthen our links with the bodies that make this policy, the European Parliament, the European Commission, the national governments, and so forth. Otherwise, I'm afraid the future in terms of policy and in terms of funds as well, because the funds and money that would be available for the media literacy community, again, if it's just for education, notwithstanding how important is education, but this are quite rhetorical arguments in Brussels. We have to be strong on a very solid and concrete way, meaning talk to your contacts is when a dossier or policy dossier are in discussion.
Thanks a lot. So now it was first Hans Martens from European Schoolnet, and then it's you. Thank you.
So I have a joint question for Auke and John. So you both seem to agree on the fact that the outcome is rubbish, so you don't like it. But I have the impression you think that for a fairly different reason. So in the way Auke approached it, you seem a bit more libertarian about the fact that we shouldn't be regulating children, while I think John is more pointing to the fact that children do need certain specific rights to provision, participation, but also protection. So I was wondering, we know you think it's rubbish, but what would have been the alternative? So Auke, would you want them to leave out any reference to children? And John, would you then still be happy with that as it being a better solution?
So I give the opportunity to both of you to answer that, and then you have your turn.
Thank you, Hans, for the question. I want to stress out that we can have a solution for that. For instance, platforms like, for instance, Facebook are able and accessible for everyone, but they are not allowed to sell or distribute the data that they are collected to secondary platforms. So I think it has to be accessible for everyone because we're having an open and free internet. That's the aim. But they are not. They can be left out of selling data, for instance.
Yeah, okay. I mean, so you could take the view, as our friend at the end does, that rules are irrelevant because kids just do it anyway, which is a stupid point of view. These rules have legal consequences, profound legal consequences. I haven't got time I am an ex-lawyer, happy to explain them at great length at lunch if you want, but we don't want our institution to make bad rules because they're irrelevant. We want our institutions to make good rules, if at all possible. So Hans's question, what are we going to do? Because this is where we are. I mean, this is it. It's the law. I mean, it's going to be law in June 2018 in every single country, including my own, because I'm sure we will still be in the European Union in 2018. My practical proposition is, I've got two things. First of all, I think the Commission needs to come clean and say what it thinks the path forward is, what clarifications, what self-regulatory and other mechanisms might be developed to help deal with this new scenario. By the way, no group in this room should spend any money now on developing new materials and educational empowerment for children until you know what your national parliament, your national government is going to do about the age, the legal age. You could be wasting your money. The other group of people I think that we're going to have to bring into this are the data protection authorities, both the new European Data Protection Supervisor and the national data protection authorities in each of the 28 member states, to try to help us all to understand how they think the consequences of this new regulation are going to be in practical terms. My basic position throughout this whole thing, and by the way, this didn't start in 2012. This started in 2009. But even if, let's take 2012 as the starting point, that is a long time for something like this to have been going through the process and still to come out the other end as bad as it did. My position throughout has been we have to have a fixed ages, we have to have rules which are based on age, but they should be based on research that justifies the decision that we take about age. The only reason 13 was established as a de facto standard in Europe was because all of the American companies adopted it, and the only reason the American companies adopted it is because they were obliged to by the 1998 Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, a piece of legislation developed in the 20th century when I was still young, before social media existed, before Web 2.0 existed. Web 2.0, Google didn't exist. Well, Google just existed, okay? Danny Zuckerberg was 14 years old and still at school. So it's a completely out-of-date rule that should have been comprehensively revisited and assessed before the European Union took the view that it did. We're past that now. I think all we can do is look to the Parliament, the Commission, and above all, the data protection authorities to try and ameliorate the situation as best they can.
Thanks a lot. We've already run out of time, but we will take these two more statements and then I wrap up in one sentence, I think. Up to you.
Yes, there shouldn't be an age limit to partake in the discussion within society. There is the use of social media is a very important tool for us in this digital age for talking about anything. Democracy is kind of based on that discussions, and there should not be any age limit to take part of that. With the arguments about people in different countries having different kind of age limits, for example, buying beers, is kind of not relevant because buying beer is not a human right, but yeah, being part of a democracy is.
Good point. Okay.
So
Here you go.
David Wright from the UK Safe Internet Centre, part of the InSafe Better Internet for Kids programme. And it's more, I suppose, it's picking up actually on two comments, and also the title around, so empowerment through education. And I'm thinking more formal education and the education system, and from UK, or typically from a UK perspective as well. So looking at schools, so 10, 20 years ago, schools used to be a place where people would go along to see new things, particularly technology. Where we are today, we use this kind of term that children often require to power down. They're not allowed to take technology into school. So we've kind of almost done a complete reversal of where we were 10, 20 years ago. So the environment and the availability of technology is one comment. And then the capability of a school to provide formal education, which is a point that was made at the outset. One of the tools that we as across Europe have tools that enable schools to assess where they are with online safety and delivering online safety, their capability. And from a UK perspective, this is a result of some 10,000 schools, that staff training and the capability of staff is consistently the weakest part. The evidence suggests that schools spend more time training parents than they do their own staff. So we're not necessarily in a position we haven't got the technology available, and we haven't got the skills within the formal education settings to deliver it. So two fundamental problems to overcome, and given the complete reversal that we had sort of 10, 20 years ago.
Thanks a lot. You gave me the perfect assist to score the final goal, I think, because what we are doing here is talking about internet governance, and I'd like to summarize it up and to bring it back to that point. Which task would internet governance have in that question for empowerment through education? So, what role should internet governance play, and how can we influence that process? And I think we came to different statements about age. So age is debatable, and also I think what content should be in the media and information literacy curricula is debatable. There were many suggestions, but it's debatable, and this should be part of the further discussion. But in the end, internet governance it all should ensure that all have equal opportunities and equal access to education. So when we debate what content is in the curricula, that is okay, but we could not debate about having equal access to education and having equal opportunities to make use of whatever the internet is offering, not only to young people, but to all people around the world. And so I would like to take that message to the EuroDIG back to the plenary, that internet governance has a role to play in that and has the task to ensure equal opportunities and equal access to education. Thank you.
Maybe we should stay.
Maybe we should take it. Oh, John? Or maybe he's coming back. We should have a group photo of the people. John, we just want to have a group photo with you and all the guys and girls.